So I'm going to be telling the story of La Llorona. And it's about a girl named Maria. And she was the most beautiful girl in the village. And because she was so beautiful, Maria thought she was better than everybody else. And as she grew older, she became even more beautiful and so proud that when she would go around, she would say that no man was good enough for her. Well, when the men in the village tried to get her to marry them, she would say, "I will marry the most handsome man in the world." And then one day, a young rancher from a rich family came into her village. He was handsome and he could play the guitar and sing beautifully. And Maria said, "Yeah, that's the man for me." Before long, she and the ranchero became engaged and soon they were married. At first, things were fine. They had 2 beautiful children and they seemed to have a happy family together. But after a few years, the ranchero went back to the wild life of the prairie. He sometimes left town and was gone for months, and when he came home, it was only to visit his children. He seemed to care nothing for the beautiful Maria. Sometimes he said he wanted to marry a rich woman of his class. Well, Maria was a proud woman, and she became very angry with the ranchero. She also began to feel anger towards his children because he only paid attention to them and never to Maria. Well, one evening, Maria was walking with her 2 children by the river. The rancher came by in a carriage with a rich woman, and he stopped and spoke to the children, but didn't even look Maria in the eye. Then he left with the rich woman. When poor Maria saw that, she became terribly angry, and she turned against her children. She took her 2 children and threw them into the river. But as they disappeared down the river and tried to save them, well, she did, but they were gone. The next morning, people found her and her children's bodies dead. But the first night they buried Maria, the people heard the sound of a woman crying by the river. It was not the wind. It was La Llorona, crying, "Where are my children?" And they saw a woman walking by the river. So they called her La Llorona, the weeping woman. And now, parents tell their children not to go out at night because La Llorona may catch them.
About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite, but all that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday somewhere around 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weekend, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was a silhouette of a man, dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance-walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but still looking skyward, smile as wide as his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to see where he'd gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relief until I saw him. He'd crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoed steps as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And he stopped again about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. What I meant to ask was, "What do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone, but what came out was more of a whimper. What? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it, and I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started walking away, just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side road and back into a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of my way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane, and that's a very, very scary thing to say.
A teenage boy drove his date to a dark and deserted lover's lane for a makeout session. He turned on the radio for mood music, leaned over to whisper in the girl's ear, and began to kiss her. Minutes later, the mood was broken when the music suddenly stopped mid-song. After a moment of silence, an announcer's voice came on, warning in a warning tone that a convicted murderer had just escaped the state insane asylum, which happened to be a mile within where they were parked, and urging anyone who notices a man wearing a stainless steel hook in place of his missing right hand should immediately report his whereabouts to the police. The girl became frightened and asked to be taken home. The boy, feeling bold, locked the doors instead, assuring his date that they would be safe. Attempted to kiss her again. She became frantic and pushed him away, insisting that they leave. Relenting, the boy peevishly jerked the car into gear and spun his wheels, and then he pulled out of the parking space. When they arrived at the girl's house, she got out of the car and, reaching to close the door, began to scream uncontrollably. The boy ran to her side to see what was wrong, and there, dangling from the door handle, was a bloody hook.
Boy, is this thing on? Oh! Hello there. I apologize. I've been trying to figure out this newfangled Zoom. Life's been hard since this pandemic began. Anyway, my name is Andrew Truman, private investigator. Now, I know why you reached out to me. I can't say that I blame you. This is a big case that I'm working on here. Now, as you know, there have been sightings of an unexplained, unidentified creature in the area, specifically the New York State area. Now, these sightings have been all of as recent and as far back as the 12th century. Now, how do I know this? Well, I have documents that depict the same similar story from across the 12th century all the way to the 21st century. Different notes, different descriptions that have been written out, all depicting the same demonic, scary creature that we know is the rake. Now, allow me to open up the files here on my computer, as you know, everything has been transferred over to the computer, and I will read to you each and every single last description that we have in our archives. Now, unfortunately, we do not have them all. We have very descriptive and very informative pieces that I think that you would like to hear. Now, how does this darn computer work? I need to find it. All right, there he is. Okay. This first piece of evidence is a suicide note from 1964, and it reads, "As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It's not the fault of anyone other than him, for once I awoke and felt his presence, once I awoke and saw his form. Once again, I awoke and heard his voice, and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye. Tragedy." Now, in the same box, there were 2 additional envelopes addressed to a William and a Rose. One loose personal letter, no envelope. "Dearest Linny, I've prayed for you. He spoke your name." And a journal entry, translated from Spanish from 1880. "I have experienced the great terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand, I will not sleep. His voice." We were unable to translate the rest of the description as it was uneligible. Now, as frightening as that does sound, there's more. Unfortunately, we have a mariner's log from 1691 that states, "He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt a sensation. He took everything. He must return to England. He shall not return here again at the request of the rake." Now, we have the most recent entry. An entry that makes my stomach curdle. Most descriptive so far. It states, 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We're all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. About 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized to him and told him that I thought he got out of the bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped, pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly his knee almost knocked me out of bed. He grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting the dark for a half a second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting, facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, or concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled to the side of the bed and crawled quickly in a flailing sort of motion right across the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds. The creature then placed its hand on its knee and ran into the hallway, leading to the kids' rooms. I screamed, ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got into the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter Clara. The creature ran downstairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the rake." I apologize. This is just a lot. Would you like me to continue? All right. My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing her daughter to the hospital. They did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. Police were helpful at first. The local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published. The local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now referred to as the rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages. Never mentioned it again. The ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night, for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day. I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the rake. I can't listen to it long enough to begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. Thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I've not seen the rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know in fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring back at me. If you have any experiences with this creature, Lord, I pray for you.
The white dress. There was a young girl who lived down in the Caribbean islands. She was so excited to go to the senior prom later that night, but if only she could afford a new dress. She thought to herself, maybe I'll go look and see if the thrift store has one after I go see my old friend. So she gets ready and she heads down to the funeral parlor to go see her old friend. As she was walking down the hall, she came upon an open casket, and she looks inside and she sees the young girl, who looks almost exactly like her. She thought to herself, wow, that is a beautiful dress. It's white satin and it looks just like a prom dress. If only I could wear that dress to prom. She starts to walk away when she sees the funeral director come in. And he is carrying what looks like a giant key And the funeral director looks at the girl saying she better get her last respects, pay her respects now, because he's about to lock the casket. So he goes over and he locks the casket, and the girl is saddened by the thought of never seeing this dress again. The girl leaves with the funeral director and finds the right room to pay respects to her old friend. The young girl goes to leave, but she can't get the thought of the older girl at that dress out of her head. So the young girl goes back into the room, and she sees the funeral director had left the key. The girl thought, this is perfect. So the young girl goes in. She opens up the casket, and she takes the dress. Later that night, she goes to the senior prom wearing the white satin dress. And while she's walking around, she sees her crush walk up to her, and he asks her to dance. And she is so happy she finally gets to dance. They dance for hours and hours and hours. But as time goes on, she starts to feel ill. And after a couple hours, she collapses. An ambulance is called to rush her to the hospital, where on arrival, she is pronounced dead. The young girl is lying on a table as the mortician's assistant comes in to prep her body for burial. The young girl is wondering, why can't I move? Why can't they hear me scream? And she's trying as much as she can to get anyone's attention, but no one comes. The young girl is in a casket, and all she hears is the sounds of dirt being shoveled on top of her casket. She's trying as hard as she can to scream to get anyone's attention, but nothing happens. She hears faint sounds of people talking, like someone's right outside. She tries anything. She nudges the sides of the casket, but nothing. She hears someone saying about how there was another young girl about to be buried when they heard screams coming out of her casket. They open up the casket to find a young girl screaming for help, wearing just a slip. One of the gravediggers made a comment about how the young girl was saying she was possessed with voodoo magic, and the dress was covered with something called death powder. The gravedigger continues on and mentions how death powder is used to make someone sleep, make it seem like someone is sleeping like the dead. And the young girl is hearing every word in this casket. And the last thing she hears is, I wonder what happened to the dress the other girl was wearing, as she slowly sinks deeper and deeper into the ground.
I had opened up the door to my new apartment, and now it was night time. Before in the day, when I clinched the deal, the light had streamed through the 2 windows. To begin, The switch is not to the right of the door as you enter and swipe your arm up and down the wall, nor is it to the left. So I'm banging along the wall until I find it across the room, which was my first sign that this apartment was enigmatic. So there I am. I have my suitcase and the first boxes and that one dim bulb above me. And tonight I'll sleep on the floor in the bedroom on blankets. It's fine. It's fine. I plug in my phone. I discussed with the phone company after I'd signed my lease and before I'd gone away on a trip of some weeks, I would like to have the outside world when I entered my apartment for the first time weary and with the dust and muck of strange places still caught up in the interstices of my rubber sneaker soles. So this is nice. I charge my phone. I dial. I lean my body up against my own weary suitcase and it rings once, twice, 3 times. I expect voicemail and I'm disappointed when the line clicks over. I hear the receiver and I wait for a hello. Hello, I say hello, and only a long pause. And then, hello, I say, it's me. And then a very low whispering. And this is odd. So I prick up my ears and a continuous jittery whispering. I can see my friend on the other end of the phone in a dark bedroom and a maniac prowling through the house so very silently, passing back and forth past the half-open door, only a shadow cutting through the hall light, and my friend crouched behind the bed, watching, clutching his alarm clock as though it had a blade edge. Unknowing, should he explode into the open and chance it? Or should he slide under the bed fully, but in nasty expectation of a moment when the clumping maniac boots stop? Pace past, and then stop. Right just by his head. He could reach out and he could touch them. If anyone would ever want to touch maniac boots, and the coverlet that had concealed him rises slowly up, and there's a terrible pause right by his face. Maniac boots, maniac pant legs, and then almost acrobatic maniac face rotates upside down into view, flashing horrible maniac grin. Are you? I said, and the whispering continues. And it's urgent, and it's very low, so low I can't make it out, but it isn't. Although it's saying urgently, it doesn't seem to be saying to me. It continues on, fluid and rapid like a hard-running river, and I think for a moment, it's the maniac himself, crouched, gibbering over the half-dismembered body of my friend. But then I hang up. I think, that was a misdial. Maybe I crossed the wire. So I look at the number again, and very firmly I dial very carefully. And the phone rings and rings and rings, and on the 8th ring, I hang up, because obviously there's voicemails. Obviously. So I look around the apartment in the one dim light, and I feel prickly. I think, well, maybe I should go out again, sit in a lit up takeout Chinese place somewhere, or a swanky bar, and absorb some atmosphere. But first I make another call. This friend also. I've been away 6 weeks, so his voicemail gone out of fad in that brief time. I make one more call, and the fourth ring picks it up and says nothing. Hello, I say hello, and again the whispering. As if we'd not left off before, whispering without pause. Man or woman, I can't say, but whispering. Hello, I say this time. Hello, who are you? Who are you? Can you hear me? Hello. And this time it's louder. It's louder. And I could almost, but I can't quite make it out. I hang up. Well, I think I'm going to have to get my phone fixed. And now I thought I might unpack. I don't have a dresser yet, but I've got hangers. I've got hang things up in the closet on the wall. And then I think, no, I'm gonna, I think, out somewhere. So I stand and I think, oh, how inconvenient is this light switch on the wall opposite the door? Extremely, it's perverse. I ponder for a moment, thoughtfully, electricity early in our century, and whoever's cousin it was thought, oh, it's just going to be simpler, tear open the walls on only one side of the building or something, and I'll never know. So now I can turn off the light, and then I can stride across toward the door in the dark, which I don't relish doing. Or is it, I just leave the light on? But I never like to think of a light bulb, burning in an empty room. To me, it's not only wasteful, but it's somehow eerie. And I picture firmly before me the bright restaurant full of artful light schemes and, fresh flowers and everything wafting, and I turn off the light and I'm 2 steps toward the door and I think, God, I should change something, because I'm now in a city, in my shoes for one, also my shirt, which is sticky. What was I thinking? But I've been so eager. But also, I should wash my face if I could find my towel. So 2 steps back, I flick on the light switch, but the light will not. No. Up, down, the light is off and the dark is still on. Well, damn. I can feel in the dark if I touch the zipper of my suitcase. And there is a tremendous pounding on the door. Pound, pound, pound. Pause. Pound, pound, pound. Who is it doesn't tap first and then knock and then move on to pounding? Who is it starts straight away with pounding? Pound, pound, pound. Pause. Pound, 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 pound. Christ, will the door not give way? There's underneath the door, I can see 2 where the hall light cuts out. 2, there might be boots. Well, someone's standing there and I'm not breathing. I can't move. Pound, 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 pound. And then it stops. And whoever it is there, and I'm waiting for until the stillness is more terrible than the pounding. And then there's a light touch on my shoulder. I don't know why. I don't know why I don't shriek and shriek and shriek and shriek, but I suppose I'm petrified. And I look to my shoulder, and where there's a little white flake of plaster. And I look up toward the ceiling, and in the ceiling there's a wee crack has opened up by the pounding, and now I'm trembling, but I look back from my shoulder and the ceiling and again and toward the door, and there's something to light from under the door. The pale wash of the slab of light is different. I can't see the two interruptions of the light under the door, the boots, or they might just be shoes. I'm only thinking boots. I'm thinking boots are gone, but I haven't heard anyone. I haven't heard anyone walking away. My ears stunned, and I'm listening abnormally. I'm holding my hands away from my side, and my ears are, all the blood in my body is trembling in my ears, and there's not a shifting, a shuffle, or a coughing. I hear nothing. I hear nothing, and then from the bedroom to the left of me, I hear the whispering. And then it says my name.